Hello there, everyone, and welcome to the Jaws of Life podcast, episode 2. I'm your host, Jeff White, and I'm also your guest until I get to the point where I'm going to have guests and stuff. It's just me. Kind of one of the points of the podcast, as I said in the last one, was that it was just recording my thoughts. I thought, you could have a journal or a diary or whatever, but I think sometimes when I'm sitting there and I'm thinking and I have these thoughts, I think I better express them through word than I do through writing or anything like that. I think that's more my medium to talk about them out loud, not just think about them, but talk about them out loud, almost like there's somebody sitting here. So for right now, as this thing is just getting going, it's just going to be me. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, you can, I say something that interests you, or I interest you with the things coming out of my mouth. We'll see. But let's get things. I got some topics I want to talk. I wrote some topics down this time instead of just kind of free flowing like I did last time and just saying what came off the top of my head. I wrote some topics down this time. So first topic, Russian Grand Prix. That happened not last weekend, but the weekend before that. And we're actually, this is May, let's see, what date we got here? May 11th. So we're coming up on the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. So I figured I wanted to talk about this one, get it out of the way before that one came up. But if you are an F1 or racing fan, I think that was a good one to watch. Unfortunately for the United States TV broadcast, we don't get the full race. We get like bits and pieces of it, and sometimes we miss what's going on. As I noticed, because I will rewatch the race with the Sky Sports broadcast, which is the European and other parts around the world broadcast, and it seems to me that they have the better format. I think our format with NBC Sports Network is more set up for NASCAR, and they rely on a lot of commercial breaks. Because I think with NASCAR, you have a lot more caution flags and opportunities to go to a commercial break. In F1, you might not have one safety car. In this race, there was one at the beginning, and there wasn't one later on. So there's very little opportunity for them to go to advertising. I think that needs to change. If they want more people to get involved in the United States and watch F1, you're going to have to play the race from start to finish with no interruption. And going to the top right screen where it goes a little small and you can see what's going on but you can't hear anything is, I don't think that's sufficient enough. And, this is all my opinion, but I think I get a different feel for the race when I watch it with a Sky Sports broadcast, and you have these kind of newer, fresher commentators, especially Martin Brundle. He's pretty good at saying what's going on. And I get a different feel for the race when I watch it on there. In this race, watching on NBC Sports, it almost looked like Valtteri Bottas was walking away with it. But then you watch the Sky Sports, and he had to fend off and take pressure from a 4-time world champion who lap for lap, they were going lap for lap, and lap by lap he was closing the gap. And then he had the mistake later. It was like later after the middle part of the race that closed the gap by a second and a half. And if he would have had another one, I don't think he would have been able to hold him off, or it would have been really difficult. But it was good. It was good to see them put in, those laps, and it was a race. That's kind of what racing. There wasn't a lot of overtaking in this race, but they were going lap for lap, and I think that was exciting to watch. If you knew what was going on, that, and that's the thing about racing. Like, you kind of have to know. You have to be educated on the sport. It's like watching jiu-jitsu. You have to know what's going on, or you need somebody to be able to explain what's going on in very simple terms for the casual watcher. And I don't think we necessarily have that now, or it's not as consistent maybe, and it's hard to get new people when it's like that. It's really difficult. You talk about Bahrain 2014. That if that race was every weekend, you would have you'd probably have no problem getting new people. But that's the truth about racing, is you're not going to have that every weekend. But when you don't have that, you have to have somebody to be able to explain what's going on, and that it's not always a possibility. But looking forward to the rest of this season. I think it's going to be exciting. I think it's awesome having Ferrari right up there with Mercedes, and it looks like they are up there in terms of pace. Let's hopefully they can keep it together when it comes to the strategy calls, because I know they kind of faltered on that last year. But hopefully for the rest of the season they can keep it together when it comes to that. I think they have the car to do it. I think they have two drivers, especially Sebastian Vettel, who are capable of doing it. Let's just hoping that the whole team can hold it together. Enough about that. Moving on to next topic, The 24-Hour War, a documentary by Chassis Productions, which is Adam Carolla and I believe Nate Adams, which documents it's an awesome documentary, documenting really the rivalry between Ferrari and Ford back in the 60s, where Ford tried to buy Ferrari, and Ferrari, because they couldn't meet on these certain race terms, Ferrari was like, nah, never mind, at the last minute, and that totally pissed off, I believe it was Henry Ford II. But I think it was great for, I think that instance, that part was great for those two companies, because it gave each of them stout competition to raise the bar in what they were both providing for the Ferrari for the world of racing, and Ford not only for the world of racing but for cars in general. It seemed to be like it motivated them to be better companies for both of them. I think for different reasons. I think Ferrari was pretty much showing that, look, we can do what you can do. If you're not going to allow us to buy you and include us in what you can do, we're going to do it on our own, and we're going to show you that we can do it. We're going to put up a fight. And then Ferrari pretty much had to raise their bar, because they were pretty dominant before that. And then at that point, you've got to show that you can hold your own against some pretty good competition who's willing to invest large sums of money, which Ford did have at the time. And for Ferrari, I think they were struggling a little bit financially, which is why they were looking at maybe letting Ford purchase them. I think as we look at it in hindsight from now, I think it was great that it didn't go through. I think there's the possibility that maybe Ferraris would have been watered down after that. Usually big companies tend to do that with a company like Ferrari, but I'm glad it didn't happen, and I'm glad it led to what actually did happen. And we had the GT40 come out of that, and I guess you would have to say that Ferraris wouldn't be Ferraris this day if they didn't have that initial, kind of competition that they got back then, because they did develop some pretty badass race cars out of it. So I think all in all, it was a great thing that happened. And the 24-Hour War, I watched it on Amazon. I think it was on Amazon. Yeah. And it's great. I mean, it's great even if you're not a car person. It's just a good story. It's a good historical story, and I think it's worth a watch. So definitely check that out. Also, Winning is another Adam Carolla documentary on Paul Newman and his story. Adam Carolla is a great storyteller, and he tells both of those stories really well, and so they're worth a watch. So check them out. Moving on to next. I recently did, you can check it out on my YouTube channel, I recently did a video with the Bolt EV, showcasing what I believe to be probably the best regen system out in an electric car right now, especially at the price point that the Bolt is at. And if you look at the video, essentially what I was trying to do is I had been working with the Bolt EV and noticing just how amazing it was regenning. So I was like, wow, this is actually, and at first it kind of, it struck me as kind of like, well, this is pretty cool. And then it was consistently regenning a lot, and I would start out with trips with, 100 and whatever mileage, and I'd finish and I'd have either the same amount of mileage or more mileage. And I was like, oh, that's kind of crazy, that the car can actually do that. I also was pretty surprised at how well the car drove and how well it handled. And I think partially part of that is, well, number one, the weight is down really low. The battery, the tray, that's based on, I think is in the right position in that vehicle. I think Tesla showed us that is where you put the batteries. You put them down low, and you put the rest of the car on top of the battery, and you lay the battery off. That keeps that, because if you look, there's a stat I saw that the battery tray in itself, all those components weigh more than the body of the car. So why not put that stuff down low? I mean, that just makes perfect sense. Then you account. I think the steering system, which is an variable electric steering that adjusts to the torque being distributed by the electric motors. I think there's something about that steering system that just works well and gives you good feel to it. And then the car, the seating position, and how you can put the seat in the steering wheel, and it just feels. And I've got some ideas for some. I think it would be interesting to see the Bolt EV in like some sort of touring car electric race series. I think it's decent. It's pretty quick, especially 0 to about 60, 0 to about 70 miles an hour. It's really fast off the line and stuff like that. So I think it would be cool to see them in a race series or something. And I just like the way it drives. I'm pretty impressed by that car. I think it's a great car. I think it's well worth the money, especially if you're looking for an electric vehicle to be your only vehicle. I think you could do it with that one, especially if you lived in an area like a metropolitan area like LA or San Diego, and you didn't really drive more than, man, I think, if you didn't drive more than 100 miles a day, which they've done studies and figure out that a lot of people don't drive that much every day. And I think you could do well especially if you had the 240 volt charger at home. You'd be able to plug it in overnight. I think you'd be just fine with that car. I think you'd be happy with it. It has a technology that I'd be looking for in a car at that price point, in an everyday car, and I think it's a great car. So if you want, check out my video. It's on my YouTube channel, and let me know what you think. You can put it in the comments of this podcast audio, or you can put it in the comments of the video. Which kind of leads me into my next thing I want to talk about is the Maven, the Maven app. The Maven app, which I used for my Bolt video, is kind of cool, especially if you're looking for a short-term rental, so less than a day, and you just need a car for a couple hours. Maven is this app. You put it on your phone, and it allows you to look, and closest to me is in LA is where the cars are, but I believe it's owned by GM or it's run by GM, something like that. They have a stake in it, so it's all GM vehicles. So there's Cadillacs, ATS, CTS, CT6, XT5. There's Cruise, Malibu, the Volt EV, and I think there's some SUVs in there, Tahoe, some other stuff. They also have like a 28-day, like a month kind of a rental that you can do. But yeah, it's a pretty cool little system they have there. You reserve the car, and then what happens is around the time of on the time of your reservation, it allows you to walk up to the car, use your phone to unlock the car. You never see the key because everything's all push button start and keyless entry and stuff like that. So it uses the app to unlock the car. You get in, it knows that you're supposed to be taking it at that time. It has your credit card on file and all that stuff. They give you fuel with the electric cars. There's a charge point card in there. You take the thing out. It's a good trim level. Well, at least the Bolt EV was. I haven't seen what the other trim levels of the other vehicles are, but the Bolt EV I had was the Premier, which is the higher trim level. It lets you take it out. It's got a cable to hook up Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Really nice and clean car. Really well prepared. Good location. It allowed me to take the vehicle and kind of planned it around. It was the closest vehicle I could get to Angeles Crest for my video, to take it up Angeles Crest. And yeah, it was a good experience. So I definitely recommend using the Maven app. It's seamless and easy. And I've seen some other. I think San Francisco has some. Denver, Colorado, New York, Miami. I think there was some. So they're around, and I'm sure if it becomes a popular thing, they'll increase. Hopefully they'll come to San Diego at some point where I am. That would be kind of nice. On to, let's see what I talk about Oh, okay. Recently, one of the reasons that I started this podcast was because, well, I've listened to the Joe Rogan Experience. I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast before. It was really he did this one. It was like a video of him talking, and it was about certain topics that I was interested in, and I just listened to it. And this was before he even had a podcast, so I was like, man, that'd be, listening his voice and the way what he talks about and how he can talk about it, how simple everything is when he says it, is it just resonated with me. So when he came out with the podcast, at first, it was kind of a rocky start or whatever, him and Brian Redman, but he's had some people on there that I would never hear talk in if it were left up to me to find these people. One, I probably have to read a bunch of their books, and sometimes, I can't. I don't mind reading books. I'm not the biggest book reader. I actually have to, force myself to do it, but I'm not gonna read. I'm not gonna read about some of these people. It's just not. So, while I'm driving or commuting, I drive to LA a lot. I put on the podcast and just listen, and I hear some of the most interesting stories on it. So I thought, the podcast, that's a good medium. It's a good medium to talk and go through thoughts and stuff like that. And that's one of the things I noticed about him doing it, was that it allows him to think through things, with a very intelligent person across from him. And he's not the normal, he doesn't do the normal, he's having a conversation with them. And I always thought that was kind of cool, that he could just have these random conversations or, with these random people, and they were just interesting. And I like that it's not in the interview, where I got these questions I'm going to ask and I'm trying to get to this, trying to push you to this certain point. I like how it's just a conversation between, two people. And then he had, he always says, oh, you should start your own podcast. He always recommends that people start their own podcast. And I'm sure, people are tired of hearing him say that, but it's true. I think it's a good way to go through thoughts, that you have in your head that you're thinking about, and to put them out there and see what people think, and expose certain thoughts to the world to see what the reaction to those thoughts are. And then I also listened, he had Jocko Willink on, and then got Jocko Willink to start a podcast, and I listened to that one because of his military background. I feel there's a familiarity when Jocko Willink talks where he's speaking languages. Being a Marine, there's certain things that are similar, even though he was in the Navy and he was a Navy SEAL. There's certain things with Navy SEALs that have very certain similar mentalities to what Marines say and do and train and the way they act. So hearing him talk is very familiar, and so I like to hear him talk. So I figure I have different interests than both of those two people. Joe Rogan does have a lot of interest in cars, and I have a huge, cars have been my whole life. Cars, motorcycles, anything with a motor, driving them, riding them, since I was a little kid, have had the interest. So I've studied them since I was a little kid, and so I have a pretty good knowledge base on them, and I'm always learning about them, and I work in the automotive industry. So I figure this is kind of like, I'm just another example of similar interest I'm combining both of those two sides and kind of meshing them together and doing my own podcast. So if anything, it came from that. So if you want to blame two people, you can blame those two guys, Joe Rogan, Jocko Willink. But moving on to what I was getting to, I recently listened to a podcast that was pretty interesting. If you haven't heard it, I definitely recommend to listen to it. Joe Rogan did a podcast with Guy Ritchie, and I've been a Guy Ritchie fan, not, of his movies, of Snatch, of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I just think, especially Snatch, there's something about it that just, the way it's shot, and the topics, and the characters, and stuff like that. It's just, I love that movie, and I own it. And if I own a movie, that means I really like it. Unless I got left a movie or somehow, then I probably just have it because I don't see the point in throwing it out. Have a couple of those too. But if I buy the movie, if I go out and I buy a physical copy of a movie, that means I pretty much like it. And I have Snatch, so that means I like it. So hearing Guy Ritchie talk, and hearing, especially for 3 hours or however many hours it was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and hearing his thought process was pretty interesting. He said some stuff that I definitely agree with, that I even think of myself. So it was great to hear it. You hear it from their mouth. You hear it, and you get to hear and see or you get to hear their thought process and think about it, coming straight from them and not having to read it in some other article or stupid dumb thing like that. So it was great, and I definitely recommend that podcast. If you're going to listen to a podcast, especially that was a recent one, listen to the Guy Ritchie one. It was pretty awesome. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah. So going on next, I had a kart race recently. I did. It was Super Series. It was CalSpeed Karting. If you don't know, CalSpeed Karting is it's a kart track, multi-configuration kart track at Fontana, or at Auto Club Speedway in Fontana. It's a great place to go. They do arrive and drive karting. It's one of the things they do there. They also hold other more competitive kart series there, where guys will bring their own karts and they do practice sessions and then they do full-on races and stuff like that. But they run. Why I go there is because they have arrive and drive karting. So you pay a certain price. They prepare the karts. Everybody has the same equipment. Everything is supposed to be within 3/10 of each other. So it's a driver series, and it's great because the competition is just stacked. I mean, you're talking about the spread from like the top 10 guys is tenths of seconds, and it's great. It's a great format. It's just an awesome experience and an awesome way to get wheel-to-wheel experience, and which is what I was looking for. So that's why I went there. So I participated in Super Series Round 4 this last weekend, and so I run the Sprint Series. I try to run the Sprint Series once a month and the Super Series once a month. The Super Series is better. It's more racing, more structured, more competitive. The Sprint is a little quicker format. It's like a half-day format instead of a full-day format. But you can run the race clinic in the morning and you kind of learn about the track. And then, so I like to run the Sprint Series first with that configuration for that month, and then do the Super Series as like the final for that configuration. But this weekend, because they've been paving certain sections and it wasn't ready, we ran this off configuration, which was shorter, more technical. So it was great because it was cold out. So their tires were, I don't know, it didn't feel like the tires ever got the grip that they normally get out there, because it usually is pretty warm and the sun is shining on the track, and the track evolves throughout the day and becomes less green, and it just didn't seem like it was doing that day. So that was a struggle. That was a challenge, and I liked it. The other thing was, I'm used to some of the, we ran counterclockwise, and I'm used to some of the turns, but then there was a couple thrown in there that, you have to get used to. And there's this one where you'd go from what they call a bypass, which is kind of a cool, it's a tricky turn for a lot of people to get. But you come around, and usually after the bypass, you go onto the main straight. So you have this longer main straight, and then you go down into like sometimes a hairpin, sometimes an S. And you go from the bypass onto what's like broken up. It's just not a solid, smooth surface. So you go from the bypass, which is kind of a smoother surface, onto this other surface, which is like a parking lot. It's essentially what a parking lot is usually on. So, and you can see lines, like, because I think when the NASCAR is at Fontana, they use this, they shut down CalSpeed, they take away all the barriers, and they use it for parking. But when it's not NASCAR, they go back to where CalSpeed is using it. So there are parts that could be parking lots, and usually most of the time in those sections, it's most in the straights. So you're not dealing with having to put load on the cart on this surface. And it was just so tricky, and because it was cold and stuff like that, and I'm not trying to come up with excuses, but it was just so difficult to get that one turn. And it's just kind of just a weird turn. I also have a video of it you can watch, and I just seemed to struggle with that section and trying to get the exact line, and you've got all these really competitive guys that are pushing you, and then you're trying to to focus and go slow so you can get the line, and it's just like you're rushing through there, and it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge, and I don't think I performed as well as I had liked to because of that. Especially my performance for Super Series Round 3, I thought was just I was pleased with that performance. I felt like you get one notch higher to getting closer to that race win or whatever, and I felt like I was progressing in Round 3. Come Round 4, I didn't feel like I progressed. I felt like I went backwards because I had to like relearn certain parts of the track that were pretty challenging. But I think it shows it shows you just when the variables don't go, when they all start to go south in a way of how difficult it is to put it all together. And it's something to learn. It's an experience, and had some good battles. Had some good battles out there. Seemed to have pissed a couple people off that day with my driving. One guy didn't like that in the bypass I put my cart in a gap he left open, and he didn't like that he couldn't turn in. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the point of passing, overtaking, is that I might put you in a position where you can't turn in, but that's the whole point. That's how if I was going to let you pass, well, then I wouldn't have tried to overtake you. I would have let you turn in and then just but I wanted to pass you, so I put my cart where you couldn't put yours. And I didn't hit him. I didn't touch him, but he didn't seem to be very happy with that. And then in the main, I made a last lap bonsai down the middle, down the inside of some guy in the shortest of beaches, which they were calling it that day, which was the turn at the end of the main straight, which wasn't really even too long of a straight. And it didn't work out and ended up kind of hitting the guy. But, that's racing. You go for gaps. You go for openings, and you see if you can get it to work out. And sometimes it doesn't work out. But that's the whole point of doing it at this level. The whole point of doing it at this level is that you're going to take the chance there so that you can feel what it's like to get it to work, and you can feel what it's like when it doesn't work. And then you go, you know what? And then when it doesn't work, you go, well, why didn't it work? Well, grip and maybe I should have held back and went for it later. And, it's part of the race. But this guy, he wasn't too happy with that either. So, it happens, but it's racing. That's the whole point, It's supposed to be a battle. It's supposed to be combative. It's supposed to be the combat of driving is racing. That's what it is. And so you're supposed to take chances. You're supposed to think on the fly. You're supposed to be bold, because that's who comes out on top. When it all goes right, that's who comes out the best, is the guy who was bold, not the guy who played it safe. And I'm sure you can be consistent, and you get it, but that's not glorifying. That's not fun. It's not fun to be boring and consistent all the time. I mean, I want to be, you want to be, in a sense, feared out there. You want to be where people know, like, oh, you got to watch out for this guy. He's going to go for the gaps. You want them to be on the defensive, not where they know that, don't worry about him. He's not going to go for those gaps. So you can leave the doors open all day, and he won't go up on the inside of you. I want them to double think whatever. I don't know. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. And pull it off on some people, and then have them go, whew, well, he can pull off some moves. I think that puts them on the defensive, on the back foot, and I think that's what you should be doing from my perspective. I'm sure that you go talk to some of those other guys and they know you got to play it safe and whatever. But that's my philosophy on racing, and I'm going to stick with that. And it's going to work out sometimes, and it's not going to work out other times. It's just the way it is, and I'm okay with that. But the result that day was just didn't work out in my favor. So you move on to the next one. You learn, you move on, and hopefully the next result. I like I said, I think of it when I put up the link to my video. It's not the only result I really will be happy with is a win. Multiple wins, but I want to win. And if I'm not going to win, well, at least it's fun trying to chase one down. And that is the truth of it. At the end of the day, I might not have won, but I goddamn sure had fun chasing it down. And I think you can be happy with that, So on to the next one, and we'll see. Got some other projects going on right now in my building of vehicles. I've got my bike, which I just I think on the last one I talked about getting it running. This one I got the carbs synced. I got air filters on, and I did some pod air filters, and then had to search for these clamps, and that took a bit. That's usually how it goes, but I got them worked out. Also got it got half of my suspension for my Dodge truck that I'm building. Um, that I think I talked about that on the last podcast, where I'm building this truck that's been in my family since brand new. It's been around in my family since longer than I've been around in my family. So it's kind of like my older brother in a way. It was my first vehicle when I turned 16, and I just had half of the suspension powder coated and gotten it back. And now I have to get the other half ready to take over there and get the other half coated, so I can start assembling the frame and getting that back on the road. Um, these projects are always long. They always take a long time, but that's the way they are. And I wish it didn't take this long, but that's just what happens. I've also got some other programs I'm working with in the automotive industry. Can't really say too much about them, but a lot's going on in the automotive. I'll say that. One of the things that I'm always amazed by is how automotive companies now, they seem to have gotten themselves out of the holes they were in. And they're starting to do some cool things. And things that to kind of give themselves, they're going after the looks they want to go after, and they're building cars you can tell that they're excited to build. And you can see it just by the Demon. The Hellcat was enough, and then they come out with the Demon, and it's like, geez, that's like the 60s they go all over again. And I think it's cool. I think at the end of the day, this is probably the best time in the automotive industry. And I say that because you can have your old car and you can keep it running, but you can also buy something new that has Apple CarPlay, that has navigation, that is comfortable, that gets in the 20s. You can have a high horsepower V8, and you can get in the 20s of miles per gallon. And you couldn't do that. And you have good brakes, and you have good suspension, and you have a comfortable car. And I think these are some of the best times. You have technology to help you out. You don't have to have technology, but you can choose to have it if you want to. And a lot of people are scared about autonomous cars coming out and that's gonna take. I don't think it's that easy. I don't think it's that simple. That's my theory. Is everybody thinks it's like one day we're not gonna have autonomous cars, and then the next day everybody's gonna have an autonomous car, and that's not how it works. You see some cars driving around now that are like from the 90s, and the person can't afford a newer car. So what are you just going to take away driving from them? You're going to say, nope, you have to buy this autonomous car that is probably going to be pretty pricey. You think of car you can buy now that is somewhat fully autonomous. They can't say it's fully autonomous, but it's pretty close to being fully autonomous, is the Tesla, right? And to get that technology, you have to spend, I think it's at least like 70 grand. So when's the trickle down of that going to happen? It's not going to happen anytime soon, I don't think. So I don't think anybody has anything to worry about. And I think that when you look at autonomous cars, there are people out there who don't like driving. And those people shouldn't have to drive if they don't want to. Those people who want to pay attention to their phone over driving, or they want to eat over driving, or they want to do something else other than driving, they should have the option to buy a vehicle that will do it all for them. Or they should, I think some of these services being provided where you summon a driverless car and it takes you somewhere. I think that's going to be something that's going to be pretty popular. They should be able to rely on that. The option to not have to drive if you don't want to. It's the option. It's the choice. That's what freedom is about. That's what we want. I think that's what we go and desire for as humans is choice. Freedom is choice. I can choose things. That's, you look at the best civilizations of all time, and it's about choice. It's about being able to choose and having choices and being able to decide where I want to live and how I want to live and what I want to eat and how I eat. And, that's what, you can have an iPhone or you can have an Android. You have the choice. You have multiple companies who come out with technology that you can use, and it works. So I think that's what we're going to have to do with autonomous cars also. And I think it's going to make things safer. I think it's going to make the roads less congested because you can run autonomous cars a bit different than most vehicles. And I think the balancing part of it all is going to be the best time, because you're going to have, maybe half. Let's say we go 50-50. Say we got half people, are in autonomous cars and the other half. So that's going to kind of free up, because you can run autonomous cars closer to each other. If they are aware of each other, you can run them closer at the same speed than you could a human at the same speed with another car. And you can even see that with the some of these advanced cruise control systems. You can run, say you set your advanced cruise control at 70, and then it starts to see cars slow down, so it slows down. It makes traffic flow better. Because what I've noticed driving around so much in LA, and San Diego and Southern California, is that traffic is only caused by there's too many cars, and then the speeds the speeds of all those cars traveling gets interrupted. So we're moving smoothly, there's too many cars, one car steps on his brake, the next car, and then it's that domino effect. And sometimes when you come up on traffic, you're dealing with what happened 10 minutes ago and somebody slammed on their brakes. So if we could eliminate that, we could flow more cars down the freeway. And that is what it's all about, is traffic flow. So I think that's going to help us out. Anyway, I'm trying to be positive about the whole outlook. I know a lot of people in the automotive industry, especially on the driver's side of it, are going, no, it's going to take cars away from us. I don't know about that. You got to think. The infrastructure is always going to be there. Or the infrastructure is going to be there. It's already built. It's already going to be there for us to drive on the roads. The only way I could see people trying to keep you out of your car is if they try to say that you're not safe enough to drive it. But that would mean that the system itself would have to be safer than the driver, and I don't think we're at that point. And until we got to that point, then we can have that discussion. But I don't think we're there, and I don't think we're going to be there anytime soon. I know a lot of people think it's going to be tomorrow, but I don't think so. I think we're still a ways away. But yeah, I think that's all I got for right now. Those goes over the stuff I think about. I've been thinking about a lot of other stuff also lately, but maybe we'll save that for another podcast. But this is it's more of a recording of what goes on in my brain every day. And that's why I call it the Jaws of Life, because I am the JAW in Jaws. And this is my life. So it's the Jaws of Life. And I thought that would kind of like play on words and kind of sounded cool too. So anyway, that's it for today. And if you listen to this, thank you for listening. Share it. Turn other people onto it. I would eventually like to get, guests and stuff. So, hey, you want to be a guest on a podcast that's starting out and get in there at the base? Let me know. Maybe we'll do a podcast. If you're a car person, I'm a car person. That's my open invitation to anybody who wants to be a guest on a podcast that's just starting out, and just to see where it goes. Who knows? Who knows what happens? But I would like to say that if I do have a guest, I would like them to be present here for it. I don't really want to do one. I don't like the over Skype kind of stuff. I think that you got to be sitting across. I think the best conversations I have are with people I sit across from. I have a hard time talking on the phone to people because I can't look them in the eyes. I can't see how they're reacting. So a lot of the times I feel like I'm just talking by myself, which right now I'm just talking by myself. But I would like to sit, if I'm going to have a guest on my podcast, I would like to sit across from them. And if you have a podcast and you're looking for a guest, I'd love to be. So we could, if you're looking for guests and you're starting out, and I'm looking for guests starting out, we could be a guest on each other's podcast. But I'm just throwing that out there in case anybody is interested. So if you hear this and you want to be a guest, or you're looking for guests, let me know. You can message me through the YouTube, Facebook at facebook.com/JAW Industries. Instagram, you can find me on there. Twitter at JAW Industries. Instagram is at JAW Industries. Or you can go to jawindustries.com. Check out my website. It's build, drive, maintain. That's my thing. I do those kind of three things. But it all focuses on driving. But yeah, so that's it for today. Have a good one. Watch the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. The more people we can get to watch these races, I think the better it's going to be in the long run. Also, there's just to go over the motorsports this weekend. It's a pretty good motorsport weekend. We've got a Global Rallycross in Louisville, Kentucky. I believe there is a World Rallycross race in I can't remember where. It was in Hockenheim last weekend. That's a pretty good one. That's some good racing. And this weekend, I think there's also UFC this weekend. Joanna Jędrzejczyk. How about that? For the women's 115-pound championship. And then there's also Junior Dos Santos for CB Miocic for the heavyweight champion. That is actually a good card, I think. And I like MMA, so maybe I kind of missed out on this topic to talk about. But that's going to be a good card this weekend. There's a lot of good fights on that card, and a lot of fights I'm looking forward to that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head because I didn't even plan on talking about this. But watch that this weekend. Yeah, and that's it. And have a good one. And I gotta think of like an exit. Like, stay. Just have a good one for now until I think about something clever to say on the exit. But yeah. See you guys later.